Yeah, so I think these roles are emerging, and I think people look at me as a network weaver, first of all. By default, I'm a co-founder of Sensorica, and the role is basically based on my activities within this value network. So I take care of the network itself, as a network weaver, as an animator of the network. And I spend a lot of time also doing R&D, so product development, basically design and product development. Sensorica itself began in, I think it's, you can say February 2011. The concept itself goes back to 2010. And initially I started to think about the new economy and decentralized ways of design, production and distribution, or the commons-based peer production in 2008. And I didn't call it that way. I found Michel Bowens, I think, in early 2010, maybe late 2009, and he helped me a lot to make my ideas more clear in that sense.
Okay.
So if I start with the first one, open, we're a group of people focused on designing, producing new products, new solutions, basically. Sometimes I even want to avoid the term product, because that too is semantically charged. So let's say we create solutions to our problems, a group of people, and the term open refers to barriers to entry. So it is an open space of collaboration, meaning that anybody can come in and start working on projects without permission. Okay. Open also means transparent. Can be used in that sense too, in the sense that everything we do, all our activities are posted online, so people can come on our website and actually get a sense of the activities we have and the processes also. So it is open as low barrier to entry and also very transparent. The term value. In my head, the definition of value is very broad and simple. Value is what moves people. So when you think about groups of people that self-organize, I think value it's what drives that sort of self-organization. Is the force that brings people together. And I mostly refer to value in economic sense rather than moral sense. It doesn't mean that we exclude ethics or morals from what we do, but I think people are driven by value, and this is what brings people together. This is what makes people take risks. This is what makes people commit to a project for a long term. So it's all about sharing value among ourselves, producing value, producing an excess of value, and exchanging that value with the rest of society, which you can call the market. And the term network refers to the structure of this group of people. So instead of being a hierarchy, it is actually a networked entity. It's a decentralized, flat organization. It doesn't mean that there is no structure inside. Actually, it's highly structured, but it is decentralized. In the sense that there are no power relations. There are no instituted power relations, I should say, because yes, some individuals have more influence in the network than others, and influence is power, in some sense. But there is no instituted power, meaning that no individual has power to decide what another individual should do. What brings the network together, what ensures the cohesion of the network, are value-based relations, which means that as part of the network, I understand that together we can create some surplus value and exchange that on the market and get some rewards. So I understand my place in this system of creation and distribution of value, and that's driving my behavior within that setting. Value networks, we describe them as being attractive systems. They're not systems of confinement. So that means that you have no control over the participation of members. It works a bit like open source projects. People come there and participate because they like the project, because they see some value in it. They're attracted to the project in some way or another. And if you have projects that demand a lot of resources and a lot of involvement, a big commitment, a big investment, then you need a powerful force to keep these people focused on that particular project. So in our case, we had this new prototype, this new optical fiber sensor that was at the very early stage of development, and there was a promise attached to it based on the realization that there is a market for this kind of thing. So this is a new product on the market, and it leads to a new type of research. It leads to new discoveries in the biomedical field. That is an incentive that goes more on the social side, and because there is a need for it, there is a market for it. So there are also incentives that attach to some tangible rewards in the end. Software projects, which are less resource intensive and can be completed within a short amount of time, you can rely on passion or a spark of motivation. Okay, but projects like that, like Sensorica, that are resource intensive, that attraction needs to hold people for a longer period of time. Okay, so this is what we define as seed value. So we're talking here about the infrastructure of value networks, and this is a very, very big question. And we are taking an agile approach to that. We started with some very basic tools for communication, coordination, and collaboration. These are modules that you find for free on the internet. We're experimenting with them, and they're integrated within Google's platform. So we're talking here about mailing lists, a database where you keep your documents that everybody can see and everybody can edit. Talking about means of live peer-to-peer communication, like Skype, for example. But it goes much further than that, and you need to integrate within that project management systems. You need also to integrate what we call a value system to account for everyone's contributions and to turn these contributions into equity. You need to integrate a role system that maps the roles of individuals within that sort of organization, who does what. And you also need to integrate reputation system. So you have different metrics analyzing data from different aspects of the network, and then you need to crunch that data, analyze it, and produce visuals that feed back. These visuals are consumed by members of Sensorica and allow them to adjust their activity within the network, okay, to find specific niches that they can occupy within the network, to find to decide about the roles they need to play, to realize what kind of resources are needed in order to carry out projects to their finish line, and so on. So this feedback system is also very important. It is consensus based, and as the network grows, we need to formalize it more and more. I think the reputation system has a big role in that. So you would have different people with different visions about the market, and you have a sort of a Darwinian environment inside where the one that sets out the best vision wins support for that vision, and the technical people will start to design in that direction. So you can have conflicting visions, and then everything is sorted out through this mechanism of bottom-up reallocation of resources. So if I get convinced by a certain vision towards the market, I'm going to buy into it, and I'm going to shift some of my resources from some other projects into that particular project because I get convinced that this is where the value is. Yeah, that's a good question, because we are actually in the process of deciding for the prices of our products now. What we need to understand here is that value networks, because they're transparent and open, they don't have an informational advantage over the customer. Those that sell closed products, they do have that informational advantage, and they can extract more value from the customers, from the market. We don't have that. At the same time, I think there is room to play on the fact that we can leverage the fact that we are transparent and open, because that sends the signal out that people can trust the product. And now we can go into how do you play the open game? Okay, how do you manage in this economy designing and selling open products that can be copied by anyone? And you need in order to reinforce your value proposition, you need a set of characteristics around your product. So we believe in building open products, products that are easy to customize, and we also want to sell what we call perpetual products. These are modular products that you can that don't become obsolete after a certain time. It's a bit like the PC, personal computer, where you can change different modules and have your product up to date, follow the advance of technology, but sort of keeping the same product. And I don't know how far you can stretch that, because sometimes things really become incompatible. But the idea is to build perpetual products and to build this long-term relationship with the consumer. But actually, by offering all these characteristics around the open product, we believe that we can actually generate a good revenue for ourselves. Yeah, that's a good question, because there are no clearly defined boundaries between the producers of stuff and the consumers of stuff. I think there is a continuum. I think, and we already see that within our small network. For example, we have a lab at the Montreal Heart Institute that became our first customer tester of the mosquito sensor. But at the same time, this person became a member of Sensorica. So you have a consumer of our technology that actually becomes heavily involved in the design, testing, productization of the sensor. So I think you have all this continuum. There will always be people that who will only want to purchase the product or exchange it against something else, a reward for the network. So that is a market-based transaction, and then you have other people that want to get more and more involved in the design process and even have a stake in the enterprise. One big thing I didn't talk about was the commons. The notion of commons, which is very important. Things that we share, material things, these are shareable. And then you have a knowledge commons that builds on top of that, that is accessible by everyone, and this is where new projects emerge. It's actually from these commons, from this pool of commons, And then there is, yes, then there is the overall commons, because that is open innovation that goes into a larger commons. And it's interesting also to see how these commons interact with each other. And we find it very easy for us to approach open communities for collaboration and exchange, because we present ourselves as an open network, so we can tap into their commons and let them tap into our commons. So you have a lot of free exchange. And if you present yourself as a corporation, that interface is blocked, you know, because there's two different cultures that don't mix. Yeah. You see, the corporation is always there to get something, you know, and to pay as little as possible. Mm-hmm. And the open community are more into sharing and gifts. The idea is that within Sensorica, every product has its own value system. And that then these value systems are integrated within the larger value system of Sensorica. So an individual doesn't really contribute to Sensorica as a whole. An individual contributes to a project in particular. So if you only participate into one project of many within Sensorica, you will only eventually get a revenue that is generated by that specific project itself. Okay, you will have nothing to do with other projects. And now if this value system is built to have the hooks to grow in a fractal manner, it means that this value network that we call Sensorica, it can actually grow different centers of interest. And this whole network can also interface with other networks, and if they have the same structure, it becomes just another network. So I don't think you can identify a network along its boundaries. I think what you can do, you can actually identify clusters of activities, and these clusters of activities are defined by a common interest. And within this network of networks, you will be able to identify these clusters of activities based on some, a system of interests. These clusters of activities are the building blocks of a larger value network. This is how we need to look at it, rather than something with boundaries, with a mission and focused on some project. When it comes to the role system tells you who does what. So if somebody new comes into the movement and wants to take some initiative, maybe there is someone already working on that problem. So how do you identify that person in that capacity, in that role? That person, being there for a long time, knows more than others about this problem. So before you launch a new initiative, you have to do your homework and see who has touched that topic before, who is more experienced here to talk to, and then start maybe collaborating on this initiative. So there was no mapping of the role or different roles within the organization. So people were lost. People didn't know who to talk to if they wanted to propose something new. And the reputation system is that sometimes you have many people involved within the community in the same role, in the same capacity, but some of them are better than others. So picture this: I want to become a member of the Occupy movement, and I want to start a new initiative. I need to find the guy that touched on that problem before, so that's the role. I need to find among the guys that touched that the one that has the better reputation to engage first in this discussion. That person might have a bigger influence, so might carry my ideas further within the group. And then I have to find the person that actually did something for the organization, not just spoke about it or actually did something that created value for the organization. So I think societies can exist without formal value, reputation, and role systems at very small scale, and this is the village kind of situation. Below 100 people, I think our brains can cope with that social dynamics, and we are able to predict different situations because we already have that information in our head. We know everybody in the town. We know the role they play. We know their reputation. We know how much they contribute to the community. We all have these sort of systems in our head. And if something happens within the village, we're able to predict the outcome of that situation based on our knowledge. But as the number of individuals increases above the number, above our ability to sort out that complex dynamics, social dynamics, then we lose track of things. And the whole system becomes anonymous and it breaks down. So this is where we need to formalize value, reputation, and roles. Okay, and the Occupy movement in Montreal was big enough to collapse for the lack of formal systems. Okay, and also the economics of the movement, the input of materials, donations, input of cash flow inside, and the allocation of these resources, because we didn't have a value system. That was a mess too. Okay, so resources weren't allocated properly, management of resources was poorly done, and so on. So I think there is a lesson to learn here, that open and decentralized movements need infrastructure in order to self-organize into something that we want them to self-organize. People talk about self-organization and they think it's how it always happens. Yes, self-organization always happens. The question is, the group self-organizes into what? The group can self-organize into a conference. So you have a one-to-many interaction. The group can self-organize into a round table of discussions, many-to-many interaction. The group can self-organize into a game, two teams playing against each other. A group of people can self-organize into anything, but now how do you construct the constraints around the system and the infrastructure below the system to make it self-organize into something that you want? So Occupy Montreal self-organized into two teams starting to compete with each other instead of self-organizing into one coherent group of people working together for the same goal. You see? So I think that's the big question people have to address, self-organizing, but into what? And how do we construct the boundaries around the system and its own internal infrastructure in order to make it migrate slowly towards what we want it to become, towards a state that is creative, productive, everybody feels good, and so on. So to come back to Sensorica, we also call it an open, decentralized, and self-organizing value network. And we think that the value, reputation, and role systems need to be designed in order to have this group of people self-organize into a very creative, productive environment, an environment that is fair, is ethical, and people feel good inside. So when we were talking about the infrastructure, this is the thing I forgot to tell you about the infrastructure. As we designed infrastructure in a very agile fashion, I think the measure of success of that infrastructure is how well this network performs in terms of its creativity, productivity, and in terms of being an environment where people feel good and feel respected and are empowered. So we have to build metrics in order to sort of quantify these results, okay, characterize the state of the system, and if it goes into a wrong direction, we adjust the infrastructure, add new modules, and drag it towards the trajectory that we want it to go in.